Welcome to the Sales Influence Podcast, where we talk about fathoming the why in how people buy. I'm your host, Victor Antonio. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for lending me your ears. Today, I want to talk about something that's a little bit off-center, but I think it'll be interesting. Let's have this discussion. Let's talk about it. So, if you watch the media or the news, everything's about politics, right? We become a very, very argumentative society when it comes to politics. No, I'm not going to talk politics itself, but something hit me. Something rather strange hit me that I realized when I started thinking about why do people vote for the candidates they vote for. How do they vote? How do they make a voting decision? And you know me, I'm all about decision making. Why do people decide the things they decide, and what's the process for making a decision? So I started thinking about voters, and I said, how do people vote? And then I came up with 5 categories of voters. See if you agree with me. And then I'm going to tie it into sales. So trust me, hang in there. It's going to be fun. All right. The first voter is a single issue voter. There is one issue that a candidate talks about that they care about. Whether it's climate change or less government, take your pick. There's always one issue, gun reform, right? Or, free health care, whatever it may be. There's one issue. There's one issue that a voter will choose that says, you know what? That candidate supports my issue. Boom, I'm going with that candidate. The other type of voter is a well-informed voter. This is a person that really looks at both sides. You may even want to call these folks independents. They really try to assess what both sides are saying, at least the main candidates, and you see who you want to believe. You basically analyze the information. They look at the information. They look at the different issues they're pushing. They try to understand what the priorities are, and they make an informed decision. These are people who read a lot, study a lot. They don't listen to the hearsay. They don't listen to the sound bites. They investigate for themselves and then come to their own conclusion. Number 3, then there's the partisan voter. This is the one that says, I'm a Republican, I'm voting Republican. I'm Democrat, I'm voting Democrat. I'm an independent, man, I'm voting. I don't know how, but I'll decide when. No, in other words, Democrats, Republicans, these are partisan people. And again, they're going to vote for who they want to vote. Independents try to walk the line, almost like well-informed voters. They try to figure out what information they need to make the right decision. I love those people. Now, then there's low information voters. Yes, there's a lot of those out there, and these are follow the herd people. These are emotional people. They don't have all the information. They just know that they resonate with somebody, right? They feel that. I just feel that I should go this way. And they're really motivated. They're really influenced by the media, right? Or what they read or what they hear, what their friends tell them. But they really don't understand the information at a deep level. They just know that that's what they heard. And guess what? That's how they're voting. And I'm sure you've run across people who are low information voters. Then category number 5, unfortunately, are the non-voters, the reluctant people. These are people who've just given up on politics and says, screw that. I'm not voting. I know this country went to war just to have a vote, but you know what? I'm not going to exercise my right to vote. And these are people who simply don't vote because they've just resigned themselves to the fact that nothing will change. And you know what? Why even try? Why even vote? It doesn't even matter. We don't even have a democracy. We have a republic. They'll use arguments like that. Now, what does this have to do with selling? Because this is not a political podcast. When I started looking at that, I started looking at voters, why people vote the way they do, how they make their decisions. See, a vote to me for somebody is like you're buying into what that candidate is saying. So think about it. From a selling standpoint, it's worth giving some thought to how people vote. And by vote, I mean how they buy. So for example, if you're talking to a customer, and let's say it's a B2B scenario, and let's say within that, you have 4 or 5 different agendas represented. It makes it hard because maybe the 5 people in there are single issue voters. In other words, they're just looking at what they're interested in. The chief sales officer cares about revenue, right? Chief marketing officer says, how's this going to impact my marketing? Chief operations officer all in cares about how is this going to work and how's this going to disrupt the flow of my delivery and service. The chief technical officer or information officer is looking at, integratability, upgradability, and operability, right? And the CEO may be looking at all things, but most of the times, these folks have a single issue. And it's our job as salespeople to figure out what is that single issue and create a presentation around that. Now, again, it's hard when you got 4 or 5 people with 4 or 5 different agendas, right? So that's why we move to the second type of voter, the well-informed voter. The well-informed voter is the type of voter or buyer that wants to look at all the information. Wants to look at all the information before making a decision. They don't want to lean left. They don't want to lean right. They just want to look at all the information and then consider all the options and then make a buying decision. This is kind of where we want to get all our buyers, our voters to. How do we get them well informed and let them make a buying decision? Now, the partisan voter, right, in this case, the partisan buyer, you see this a lot in corporate America. These are people who like a specific brand. They want to go with a specific company because that is a trusted brand. And when you're dealing with this type of voter, buyer, that's very partisan, it's very difficult because they're used to buying a certain brand. And so again, keep that in mind. Our job when we're dealing with a partisan voter, it's going to be a harder job to change them over because they're so sold on their brand. So what we have to do is come back to value and then again, move them towards the well-informed section. In other words, try to get them off the brand and really make them look at the end results of what we're trying to offer. Number 4, the low information voter. Now, you run across a lot of this. A lot of people, when you're selling something to them, may not have done the research, may not have done any research, and really don't understand what you have to offer. And the danger here is that low information voters, for those who want to manipulate people, they love low information voters. People who love to manipulate people into buying love low information voters because they'll hit the emotion, they'll talk about things that are irrelevant, but you know what? They'll hook them with the emotion. Low information voters are dangerous for us salespeople who want to sell ethically because we have to take the time to educate them. In other words, we have to teach them, inform them, give them the insight, and that's a longer sales cycle. And last but not least, the non-voter, the reluctant voter, these are people who don't want to change. You know what? I don't even want to have a discussion. Let's leave it alone. Now, I like to tie these two things together, voters and buyers, because when somebody buys, again, they're voting for your product. And sometimes, as a salesperson, what we want to do is figure out, what are we dealing with here? Is it a single issue buyer? They just want you to resolve one problem. That's it. If you can solve that problem, I'll buy from you. A well-informed buyer, well, guess what? You're going to have a bigger presentation. In other words, you're going to have to cover a lot of information and be able to compare yourself against your competitor. A partisan buyer, again, dedicated to the brand, usually dedicated to an incumbent, somebody they're already buying. So getting people like that to switch over is always the toughest sale, which is why you should study how to switch people over. And if you've listened to my past podcasts, you know I've talked about how do you get people to switch over who are used to buying something, who are partisan buyers. And again, low information voters, this is a tough one. You have to take time to actually educate them and move them up the knowledge chain, or the knowledge ladder rather, and get them to a point where they can actually be wise enough to make a buying decision. And again, I'll put an asterisk on this one. A lot of people take advantage of low information voters or buyers, and at the end of the day, you don't want to do that. Why? Because look, if I sell you something that you don't really need because you really weren't aware that you didn't need it, sooner or later, you're going to find out and you are going to regret it, and you're going to tell other people what I just did to you. So again, I don't sell that way. I never encourage people to sell low information voters or buyers without giving them all the facts. And last but not least, when somebody is a non-voter, reluctant, doesn't want to change, again, use the switchover effect. Go back and check out my older podcast where I talk about how do you get people interested, motivated, engaged again, and then switch them over. And that is it for this podcast. This was a different one, wasn't it? So I definitely want to hear your feedback on this one because I thought I'd tie those two concepts together. What I typically run across is a partisan voter. or buyer. In other words, there are people who have a specific brand that they want to buy, or they're used to buying from a specific company, and that's usually the one I run across. So out of the 5, my question to you is, and I hope you'll leave me some feedback, do you typically run across single issue, well-informed, partisan, low information, or non-voters or non-buyers when you're selling? Let me know. I want to hear your feedback. Leave it on iTunes, Stitcher, or YouTube, wherever you can. Let me know. Also, check out my Sales Velocity Academy. You know the deal. SalesVelocityAcademy.com if you want to sell more faster. Lastly, I want to thank you for listening. This is Victor Antonio, always reminding you, selling ain't hard. Let's wait for the drop. Here it comes. Be patient. Selling ain't hard when you know how. Take care. Hi, I'm Victor Antonio. I'm an author, sales trainer, and keynote speaker. I'm often asked, what makes a great speaker? Is it someone who delivers real content that the audience can use? Is it someone who engages the audience so they're part of the learning experience? Or is it someone who can motivate an audience to push them beyond their comfort zone and discover new abilities? The answer is yes. But the most important thing to remember is that I'm not there to look good. I'm there to make my client look good. Simply put, it's never about me, and it's always about them.